Show tonight. It's a Wednesday night, Buddy Martin Show. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch up to you in a second. As we start our first guest is in the green room. Actually, it's the orange and blue room. John Brantley, coach at Trinity High School. He's got a lot to tell us about, including his Celtics and also the scrimmage. Standing behind him is 6 times Final Four referee Don Rutledge and then Ainsley Lee, sports writer. All coming your way tonight. Stay tuned. The Buddy Martin Show is on the air.
Yes, it's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking. But be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye.
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
When you're a member of the Gator Nation, you know what it means to never back down. Meldon Law has been a proud supporter of the Gator Nation since 1971. Two forces that won't back down. As the old saying goes, if you can't beat 'em, join 'em.
All right, thanks very much, Jeffrey. Thanks to Meldon Law for supporting his program. We appreciate it. And we're going to go now to our orange and blue room. Here's a guy who's worn the orange and blue and been a Gator all his life since he lived here. And former quarterback for the Gators. Let's go get John Brantley, the coach at Trinity, my good friend. We used to travel back in the Sawdust Trails days when we were covering the Gator football in a motor home, and we've been everywhere. Good to see you, John. How you doing, man?
Hey, buddy, how you doing, sir? I can't get this thing right, but I'm trying for you.
All right, well,
But
just
we'll
keep
see
going.
if I can get it right.
Yeah. All right. Well, just make everybody seasick.
I
It'll
got
be all
my
right.
gator head right here.
All right. While you're doing that, I'll ask you some questions. As long as you can just hold it still and talk, you'll be all right. Your face is half in and half up, but you know what? I'm proud of you. You got on. There you go. You got on. You're still trying it. John, I know you were up at the scrimmage yesterday, last night, and the University of Florida took some of your players up from Trinity. And while I know you can't talk about everything that you saw, just give me your general impressions of what you felt and saw and watching Billy Napier's team in his second year. And we got a soundbite we're going to play later from Billy after that. What'd you see and think?
Well, just like I've seen since year one, I've seen a lot more organization and practice and coaches working hard and coaching and teaching. And, the thing I saw yesterday is a little bit different. I'm excited about the defensive side of the ball and coaches, the coaching staff on the far side of the field. A lot of excitement. A lot of this young man from Alabama. I mean, he's a young guy, and that's the first time I'd been around him a little bit.
Austin Armstrong, the defensive coordinator, right?
Yeah, his enthusiasm. I mean, you can tell he's come from that Saban tree out there, and he's been around our boy from Georgia a little bit. You can see the parts that he's taken from that, and I'm excited. I saw a lot of good things from the defense yesterday.
That's a great point because no one's talked much about it. We don't really know what to expect, except I like what they did with Corey Raymond, who I think is a premier coach, secondary coach, and was one of the guys who helped build DVU at LSU. And now they've given him the back end, and both he's actually over corners and safeties, and so we'll see a little tighter coverage. So, was there one or two players that you saw that you could talk about that you think might be, I know there's been some talk about, several like McClellan kid. They talked a lot about him. I think they're proud of some of the secondary play. Was there anybody that jumped out at you, John, on the secondary?
No, I just look at the scheme and look at how hard they play. I mean, I think that's where Florida needs to get better. I mean, we can talk about individuals all you want to, but at the end of the day, how can we pull this team together and be a better
Mm-hmm.
squad and do some great things as a team? I mean, we all, buddy, it's all, and I said it's dropped down to the high school level. It's all what me, and I'm tired of it, and that's what I went up there looking for yesterday in Gainesville. What kind of team are we gonna have for us to be successful and to get back to where we need to be at the University of Florida? It's got to be a team effort. Now, granted, you got to have great individual players and everything. Don't think that I'm cutting that short, but how well these guys play together. And I saw a lot of that yesterday. There's not a lot of, great names. I mean, we're used to saying Tim Tebow, Percy Harvin, the Pounceys, and all these names in the past, but not a lot of those names up there. So, how are we going to play as a team? And I'm going to tell you what, accomplish a lot more as a team than you can with a couple of individuals.
Great point, and don't forget to mention the Brantley family, your brother and you playing together as you did, and your son playing up there, and the families of the University of Florida, the McGriffs. We could go on, the Jacksons, and people that have kind of contributions by the generation, and that's important. I'm glad to see them put more emphasis on that. A lot of talk about
But
Billy
big
Napier.
buddy, going what you were talking about, Coach Napier. He has a plan, and it ain't gonna happen overnight. And until we get the players he wants that he's recruiting, and we get those guys in there, the Gator Nation needs to be patient, and I'm gonna be patient because I want Florida to get back where they need to be, and there's no excuses at Florida. Now I use that same expression at Trinity Catholic. We don't have any excuses at Trinity. They give me all the resources and the products and the coaches to go out and get and put a nice product on the thing. So we don't have any excuses, and we don't have any excuses at Florida. So I hope the Gator Nations, sees what's happening here, and I'm pulling for the guy. And it was good to see old Billy Gonzalez back out there
Yeah,
stomping around
yeah.
out there on the practice field yesterday and everything. So I think he's putting the pieces together, but we just as the Gator Nation, we got to be patient and get that product back up to where it needs to be.
Well, let's hear what Coach Napier said about. I got a short sound bite on Billy G. Here's what he said. Well, talk, Coach. Come on. I talked too soon. Anyway, he had a comment about having him here and how glad he was, and he felt like he was going to teach them an awful lot. He said, which I liked. He said he's going to teach us a lot because Billy has been with two different groups. Don't forget he was with Irvin, as you know, and now of course with
Yep.
Dan Mullen. Now he's back, and I talked to and Billy's Napier's a former wide receiver coach. He talks about that in that soundbite, which we never heard. And he talks about it and says that when I was a young receiver coach, we looked up to Coach Billy G, Coach Billy G. And so I don't know, John, you know more a lot about the passing game than I do. I'm sure they were happy with what they had in some respects last year, that Kerry Colbert. But I think the deal is that this guy, if you look at what he's done at Florida, he's such a master of detail, and he draws them up. And you played for a guy who was like that in Steve Spurrier. He wanted every little detail to be right. And your landmarks got to be right, your routes got to be right, your timing's got to be right. I think Billy G comes real close to that, don't you?
Oh, I definitely agree with that, and that's all going to come from, they're going to support what Coach Napier's trying to do, and you saw it on the practice field yesterday in that scrimmage every day. He's pulling everybody together, all his coaches, everybody's out there, they're signaling, and they're going to try and do up tempo stuff like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people are doing. We're even going to try that this year at Trinity Catholic. I want to go faster. I want to run more
Do you
ball
really?
plays and keep the other team, you know, off their heels to where they can't settle in and make adjustments and stuff like that. I just think that's where the game's changing. And even this old guy like me, I'm up to changes, and you got to change with the game every year, and we're doing that as well at Trinity. But Coach Napier and sitting there talking to Wally Huff, who I played with, who's an SEC official, past official, who heads up everything. He's there every day, and I got a lot of good feedback from him on what's happening at the University of Florida, because he's over there meeting with the coaches and the officials and everything that's involved with the University of Florida. So I feel like we're all moving in the right direction. But again, I'm gonna say it: we got to be patient. We got to get more players in there, and get his type of players in there to satisfy what he's trying to do offensively and defensively.
Hard to keep fans patient when they got the portal and they go out and buy players, as we've seen as well, NIL, and they're seeing these teams come in there in the first, second year and making, getting up the ladder, getting players, and they expect the same from Florida. And that's a hard deck to deal from, because it ain't the same every place, as you know. Let's talk about one of your players who's there. I've got a nickname for this offensive line. I call them the I-75 Road Graders, Grators. They're big guys. They're all 300 plus pounds, and some of them are 6'8". There's a whole bunch of them in there. And Jake and Slaughter, your guy, is not quite that tall or big, but he's pretty good size. He's undersized at 310 or 315. He was playing center yesterday and taking their first team snaps.
Well, it was good to see that. I noticed that right off the bat, and heard it having a good camp and everything, but that's the first time I've been up there for the spring practice. And Jake Slaughter, who's a former Celtic here at Trinity Catholic, and he's running with the first team at center, so that was good to see. But Jake's a smart kid. That doesn't surprise me. He'll do great things for our university, on and off the football field, and I'm excited to watch him play this year. And I'm not sure if he's tied into that first slot full time right now, but he started yesterday on the first team as a center. So good thing for him, and pulling for him just like I am the rest of those Gators.
Yeah, good points. And I want to talk to you before I get to your big trip you got coming up this fall. We'll talk about that. About the running game. You were Spurrier's first quarterback, but you really do run the football a lot. And you made a living off of it at Trinity, and you had state championship teams running the ball. What's the secret besides having good running backs and good blocking?
Well, you just got to have a good scheme. You got to have, everybody on the same page. We're working on that right now as we get ready for spring starting in high school, May 1st and everything. But we've been fortunate enough to have a lot of good linemen, but we've had great run backs. And that just sets up everything else you try to do offensively. You can run the football, you can do everything else well, and everybody wants to throw it around just like we do. But when you can run the ball and you start getting 7, 8 guys in the box, that opens up the passing game. So I saw a lot of good things with the running game yesterday up
Did
there in
you?
Florida,
Yeah.
and that's only going to help those young quarterbacks, or those new
Yeah.
quarterbacks. I shouldn't say young, because Mertz
Yeah.
has been around a little
Right.
bit, but it's going to help those guys if they have to
Yeah.
start loading the box to stop those good running backs. I think it's going to make some good things happen, and I saw it in. They were running a lot of man coverage on the out, and some of our receivers took advantage of that, and we made some good throws on some long balls. So, running game only helps the overall package of what you're trying to do offensively, and I saw some of that yesterday at Florida.
We know what Ricky Pearsall can do, but we saw a couple of players there, 2 or 3 receivers. Mizell was one, and we got a little bit of talk about that. And of course, the other young guy whose name escapes me at the moment. Let me get it here in a minute. I got it written down. Andy Jean, who caught up, man, nice long catch. Some young ones
Yep.
coming up, and Coach G can coach those guys up, and we'll see where they go. But you're right. Anthony Richardson had to carry this team, quote unquote, with his passing game, and he wasn't consistent enough. And you're absolutely right. You know this. You've been around. if they can get a little production out of that passing, it's certain enough to get play action, right? If you run the football, I'm told you can get play action, right?
Yeah, and that's what it's all about. They're running a lot of RPOs. They're running a lot of quick stuff out on the edge and stuff, and trying to make things happen. And I think he's trying to take advantage, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how these tight ends evolve. Coach Napier is a big tight end guy, and that revolves around the running game as well. But he wants them to get downfield and make some plays. So we need a tight end or two to really step up. And hopefully we're going to see that evolve over the last couple of weeks as we head toward that, the spring, April 13th.
And we've heard Boardingham's name mentioned, Xander's name mentioned. Of course, they lost their starting tight end for next season. We'll see who emerges. John, real quick in the last minute, we got you. You've got a big project out of you, Trinity, who's perennially a powerhouse in its division. Now it goes way up to Ohio next year to play a school in Cincinnati. What's that all about? And that's got to be a costly deal.
Well, it's not about cost or anything. It's about exposing your players and your program to, take advantage of where we are. We feel like we're in our program, and I like to separate ourselves from some of the local schools and stuff. And this is how you do it. You go play good competition. Our kickoff classic this year, buddy. You'd enjoy this. We're playing the Key West Conks down in Key West.
Nice.
In the kickoff class. We're going to go down early and work out down in South Florida, have a practice in South Florida, and then go on down to Key West and play our golf classic down there and come back and play FSU High, Florida High, to open up our season against a team that's been in the state championship the last 2 years. So we don't shy away from that. But the game you're talking about, week 9, we're going to head up to St. Xavier up in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Yeah,
and I've already put Chris Collinsworth and I've put Chris and all his buddies on notice up in Cincinnati that the mighty Celtics are coming to town. And
Great.
I don't know if we can play with those guys, but we're going to make it a great experience for our kids and families to go up there and showcase our program and see where we stand. But, give these guys something to talk about and something to remember for the rest of their lives, to go on the road and play a class team like Xavier up in Cincinnati, powerhouse in that part of.
Last time you and I were there, we went up and see Chris at his house. I remember your buddy Chris Collinsworth, and of course everybody knows Xavier, a really well-known school, and here in Cincy. That'll be good. We'll bring home the trophy, will you?
Well, we're going to try, and we've already reached out. The Bengals have already reached out, and we're going to go over there and spend time at the Bengals complex and see those guys and everything. And I know we got a Gator or two over there, so hopefully we'll hook up with them. But no, that'll be an exciting trip, week 9, and then we'll get back here and hopefully start a big playoff run and try and get back to that state championship game and hopefully bring back the right trophy this time.
Good luck to you and the Celtics, John. Thank you so much. We're going to do this more often this summer, and we'll talk a little more about what your trip is, and maybe if people want to help out a little bit, you'll tell them how to do that. You got an NIL.
Well, we're going to probably
fund.
we're going to put something together on that, and hopefully include Chris Collinsworth and get him to Ocala and do some things. But no, we appreciate everything you do, buddy, and supporting our high school sports around here. These kids work hard in this Marion County area, and you give them the credit they deserve, and I appreciate it.
Well, we have a good group in the Ocala Quarterback Club with your brother Scott Brantley Trophy, which we proudly give to the best player in the area in 5 counties, not just for football, but for a lot of other good things. And we had a meeting today talking about how proud we were of that Brantley Trophy. And thank you for all the things your family's done for us in this community. And good luck to you. We'll talk soon, John.
All right, buddy. Thank you, sir.
All right, JB3, there he is. He's always a good guy to have around. All right, I got in the waiting room there, in the orange and blue room, you talk about officials. Now, you want to know something about what the real deal is? All the BS you think you know about officiating. Over the years, this guy's taught me a little bit about it. I don't know a lot. But we're going to ask you got any good questions for Don Rutledge? Well, he 6 times 6 times. I'm saying 6 times he refereed a Final Four. 6. I remember the night I was in Lexington, on courtside covering Georgetown and Villanova. That was an interesting game. I looked up at the guy with the striped shirt, right, with the ball in his arm and whistle. There was Donnie Rutherford right there, my former fellow attic rat at the Fidel House, Don Rutherford. So stand by. We'll hear a quick message from our sponsor, and we'll come back and we'll talk to Don Rutherford, one of the premier officials in all sports. All right, thanks very much, Jeff. And by the way, wow, here's a staggering thing. 6 teams that were left in the last 6, now there's only 4. 3 of them were from U.S. Conference USA. And here we go, Final Four. We got 2 of the 4 from that bastion of college basketball in South Florida, Miami and Florida Atlantic. I don't know. Hey, it could be great. But meanwhile, the guys in the stripes got to get it right. And how do they do it? And how do they do it better? And how are they doing? Well, Don's not going to criticize too many of his fellow zebras, but he'll bring us some insights, as he always does, to the program. Don Rutherford, I give you folks. How are you, Donnie? Hang on 1 second. I'll turn your volume up. And now, how are you, Don?
I'm doing great, buddy.
Good to see. I guess we should probably do a full disclosure here that Don and I and several other guys lived in the Fidel House attic in college. We were the attic rats, we called ourselves, because we were so poor we couldn't afford it to live in a regular. And another guy named Ed C. was one of those attic rats, rest his soul, turned out to be our own Palmer golf course architect. Don went on to become a famous basketball referee, and I'm just slugging around still as an old broken down writer. So there you go. It's a talent in that group. Don, I know you're watching a lot of the games, if not all of them. What do you see so far in the officiating department?
Well, the officials are doing okay. We've had some tough games to referee, but the teams are so different this year than they have been. There's not a lot of the blue bloods in there. There's a lot of scrappers and claws, and I'll tell you what, the 4 teams that are in there well deserve this right. And it's very interesting at the similarities of these 4 teams. And the referees will have their hands full in both of these first 2 games, and then the final game will be a real doozy.
Don's a Gator. He went to the University of Florida. Matter of fact, after he got out, he consulted. I don't know what you're doing now. Maybe you're still doing it. He was a consultant for the SEC in college officiating, and then, of course, he helped the University of Florida some things, and also, I believe, even in our Orlando Magic. Am I right, Don?
I worked for the SEC for 40 years as an official and as a teacher and trainer of their officials, and then I went to work for the NBA full-time and restructured the WNBA officiating a little bit and taught some of the NBA officials. And last year I looked at the final 13, and 5 of them were guys that we brought in when I was there. And so teaching and has been my life for 40 years, and teaching officiating has been the most fun. And the rewards when you see your fellow officials that you taught or worked with on the floor doing a good job.
Yeah.
And accepting responsibility is really a good thing.
And I want to say this, that the officiating is a thankless job, okay, for the most part. You can't ever get it right. And Don has taught me over the years about such things as not the so-called makeup calls, which he says he doesn't believe in, as I recall, and some of those issues. But before we get there, let's talk for a second about Billy Donovan. You knew him well. You called a lot of his ball games. I go back now and think, how in the world did the Gators get so lucky? I say lucky, meaning that not they were lucky to win, to have Billy Donovan and win back-to-back championships. Now a feat that seems like it's almost impossible, Don. What about that? What about Billy? And guys, people ask me all the time, is he going to go to Kentucky when he leaves the NBA? What do you know? What have you heard from Billy? What do you think?
Well, I've got a picture on my wall of the 1986 National Championship semifinals between Seton Hall and Syracuse, and Billy was playing in the game, and there was a tumble and a fight, and everybody fell on the floor, and there were Cycly and myself and Jim Boeheim and a foot sticking out of the bottom of the pile, and it was Billy Donovan's. I told him, I said, I really wish you'd come by and sign it sometime. Billy's one of the great human beings in the world. He's a man of God, and he is a great teacher of basketball and a great friend, and has been for a long time. And I appreciate what he did for the University of Florida, and I'm sure the people in Chicago are appreciating what he does up there with the Chicago Bulls right now.
Got a couple questions from our listeners. Dan Bond asks, what are Don's thoughts on that last second call in the Creighton versus San Diego State game, Elite Eight game? You and I talked about that a little bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, Lee Cassell made the call. Great guy, good official, outstanding official. The defender was behind the shooter in not any kind of a defensive position. The shooter was in the air. He put his left hand on him, on his hip, and before he released the ball, he put pressure on his right hip. That's a foul because it's easy to take a person in the air and move them just enough to make it. Well, it was an easy call. It wasn't even a hard call. People think that you shouldn't call a foul like that to decide the game. Why not? Because if you don't call it, the other side's going to say you should have called it to decide the game. So I think he got the call exactly correct, and I've heard a lot of I heard Mike Krzyzewski say the same thing today. And I really believe that, and I think the people that respect basketball and understand the game of basketball, when you're not in a defensive position and you touch somebody that's in the air and he's shooting the basketball, he moves him. Matter of fact, he went to the floor and he couldn't flop when his feet are off the ground. So, end of story.
Another thing that I heard an official say on, I believe it was Feinbaum's show, called in. He was a former, I think, high school official, and he was complaining because of the late foul, ticky-tack fouls, or giving someone the third foul in the first half or second half first half to sit him out. And he says, as an official, I always like to make sure I didn't give those guys those I didn't give those guys those fouls because the people want to see the best players in the game, and the officials want to see the best players in the game, and they shouldn't call those. Your response to that?
A foul is a foul, and when it occurs, you call it. What you call a ticky-tack foul and I call a ticky-tack foul, what are ticky-tack fouls? If it's by the rule, it's a foul. If it's not, don't call it. Some officials are more liberal than others. Some officials blow the whistle more than others. Some people disagree with that, but that's human nature. And all officials are a little bit different.
Andy McIntosh says, Don, was your call on the UCLA-Michigan game in 1993 the most difficult call you had to make in your career?
Geez, I wish I'm 82 years old, buddy. I don't even know which call he's talking about.
Yeah, really. I mean, I'm thinking that Don knows that call. Yeah, you got to be more specific. But Andy's a sharp listener. He knows. Maybe you can explain more to us, Andy. We'll get the word to him. All right. All right. So let's talk about let's talk about. Hold on, I can get my notes. I wrote these things down. Uh, the best officiating crew or officials right now in your mind in college basketball.
Well, I could name 10 officials.
We'll name 4 or 5 anyway.
All right. I think Doug Sermons is as good as there is in the game. I think Joe Lindsay's very good. I can't. Again, my memory goes blank, and there's a guy up in Philadelphia that's really good. I'll think of it in a minute, maybe. But in my opinion, I think Doug Sermons is as good as any of them.
Okay. All right. So here's a generic question, which I'm sure you heard many times, and I thought about it the other day. This is the perception, and maybe part of it is true. Why are there no calls on traveling, palming, sometimes even double dribble now? You don't see them as much. Why?
The rules are the rules, and I haven't seen a whole lot of changing in the traveling rules. Everybody thinks the Euro step is a travel. Palming the ball, when I was refereeing, you had to have your hand on top of the ball. Now they let you they put the hands on the side of the ball, but they can't go under the ball. They can't put it under the ball. They can.
So that's changed. That's okay.
Probably the interpretation has changed. The rule hadn't changed a whole lot. The interpretations changed, and that comes from the NCAA rules supervisor. And I don't know. I haven't been around for the last 20 years, buddy, so I don't know. I haven't refereed a game since '95.
Yeah.
But I think, it's much more liberal than it has been. I don't know where that's good or bad for the game, but it's much more liberal. As long as they're consistent and call it on both teams the same way, it doesn't bother me.
What is your most difficult call that you can remember that maybe could have gone either way and you had to pick a side? And you really, you made some gutsy calls. You were fearless when you made a call, and you were adamant and you're quick. You didn't waste any time. You made the call. Boom, it was made. Is there one or two that you think, man, maybe I take that one back, maybe I don't? Do you have one of those?
Yeah, I do. I made a call at Alabama. Arkansas was playing Alabama. Sprewell and Day were involved. I called a charge on Day. Nolan Richardson and Barrett and Wimp were the coaches, and my boss John Guthrie was there. I was in the lead. I called a block charge coming down the baseline. Nolan didn't like it. Sanderson liked it. My boss thought I got it wrong. We got in at halftime. He said, at the end of the game, he said, I think you missed the call. And it was probably a game-deciding call. And I said, I don't think I did. Let's look at it. And fortunately, Sprewell got his feet set. We didn't have the box in. And I remember this call this day, and Nolan didn't like it. And we got on the phone with the commissioner and Nolan and everybody the next day, and we talked about it. From that day forward, after Nolan saw it and I explained it to him, Nolan Richardson has been one of my biggest supporters because he told me after that he thought I got it right.
Wow. Can you move your face to the left some? We got about half your face here. Don't have the other beautiful side. Move to your left. There you go. Now look at me. Look at your camera. All right, so here's the thing. You always had some great Bob Knight stories, who was the most difficult guy, I think, to referee and officiate because he would get after you. And I think you told me 1 or 2 times about your experiences, which I think turned out okay. Can you remember that story?
I remember a lot of stories about Bob Knight, and I hope his health is well now.
Yeah.
My thoughts on Bob Knight is the best teacher, one of the best teachers I've ever been around in my life. He taught basketball the way it should be taught. He didn't always do it the way I would have liked him to have done it and the language I'd liked him to have done it in. And I've had a lot of games with him where probably I've refereed more losses for Bobby than wins. And Dusty May, the guy that's coaching FAU, was
Atlantic, yeah. Oh,
and
really?
he learned from Bobby Knight. and he's obviously a great teacher of the game. But Bobby and I always got along, and we had our differences on the floor, but he was always respectful. And after I retired, Bobby sent me a letter, and I'm looking at it on my wall here in my office. Said I was one of the 3 officials he trusted.
Wow!
Every time I walked on the floor. And I've talked to Bobby and Nancy a number of times, and I wish there's a lot of things we all wish that we hadn't done in our lives, and I'm sure Bobby does too. But Bobby was a great teacher. He coached the way he should have coached, and I think a lot of people are learning a lot of things about Bobby Knight now that they didn't know when he was coaching.
Interesting. All right, Andy McIntyre says you made the final call in the last 2 seconds of overtime, in which Jimmy King sank the winning rebound bucket for Michigan. You didn't call a technical on Herrick.
I didn't know why I should have, I guess.
Do you remember the game at all? Or has he got you? He may have you confused with somebody else. Okay. You would know that. All right. So let's talk a little about the Final Four from the standpoint of the fan. Some people say that it's a travesty that the Blue Bloods didn't get in. None of the top seeds got in. Not even a McDonald's All-American in the field. Did you know that? Not one single McDonald's. Yeah.
Buddy, I did not.
Yeah. And so people say, well, there goes basketball. On the other hand, the ratings in the early part of have really been good. And even though people are saying, I can't waste my time watching that San Diego State and Florida Atlantic game, that's a waste of time. And then, of course, afterward, UConn and Miami. As a fan, forget about the fact that you used to make your living calling. What do you think of that? What do you think of the tournament where the Blue Bloods don't make it in? And does it hold less interest for you or more?
To be very honest with you, buddy, I think it's more interesting. The Blue Bloods aren't going to make it in all the time. And that's why they play the games, to win and lose. And these 4 teams are so similar, the 3 of them are so similar that it's scary if you look at their history. They're all balanced in effort. They're all balanced, great defensive teams. All of them have balanced scoring. Miami has 4 people that average double figures. The 3 coaches that are coaching them, Brian Dutcher and May and Jim Larinaga, are all wonderful coaches. Larinaga's taken other small teams to the finals. The other 2 are inexperienced there. And then you have UConn, I refereed for UConn when they were in the Final Four, and they were tremendous. And now they had a drop-off, and now the coach at UConn, Dan Hurley, comes from one of the great basketball families.
Yeah, absolutely. Bobby
in the universe. His dad coached at high school in
St.
Washington
Peter's.
and put out great, and his brother coaches at Arizona State University. And I think Dan Hurley has done a magnificent job of rebuilding UConn into a powerhouse. And I think they probably are the favorites going in, but I can't count any one of these out, buddy. I just think I think if you had to pick a favorite, it'd be UConn because they're bigger and stronger than the others. But it's interesting that Miami has outscored them all, and the best Miami has the better field goal percentage, the best free throw percentage. It's just an interesting statistical matchup, and they're all so very even. I think it's going to be coaching, effort, defense, and rebounding that win the game. And whoever plays the best defense against the other team and holds their percentage of scoring down will probably win the games.
One thing they have in common is that Dusty May almost quit when he took the job, went down and saw the facilities. he called Mike and White and said, "I think I'm just ruined my career. I took a job here without seeing facilities at FAU, and they're horrible." And he wanted to quit, and they got talked out of it. And the coach from UConn, Hurley, also quit and gave up on the quit. So, but they're both came back to the game. Tremendous pressure on these guys. I understand that. It's going to be fun. I don't have a rooting interest in this. I can't say that I have one team or the other. I might say I'd root for a Florida team. I guess one or the other. As good as coaches learn is, I have a hard time rooting for Miami. It's the Gator in me. It's hard to root for Miami, but let's hope it's good basketball and fun, and the fans get a treat watching it. So.
Well, Dusty was Mike's assistant,
yes,
and he was a good. Mm-hmm. He was there, and I hope he does well.
Yeah.
I have a lot of admiration for San Diego State's coach, who has been there for 5 or 6 years and built the program and developed that program, and they're very, very talented.
They're a good basketball team. You're right.
They're hard nosed. Mm-hmm. They're hard nosed, as is Miami.
Yeah.
And that kid the other night for Miami, he was flawless on the floor. He made every field goal,
and every free throw. Right? Yeah.
I've never seen
kind of like you back when you were playing, Don.
Yeah, sure.
Listen, I can't tell you how much fun it's been having you on the show tonight, Donnie. As always, and always had great respect for you as a friend and as an official. And congratulations on such an illustrious career. And I hope we can do this again sometime soon.
I do too, buddy. And you're a great friend to me. And I have a great love for the game of basketball. As I played it, I coached it, and I officiated it. And it developed my lifestyle. It taught me a lot about myself. And I'll tell you this for people who don't know this. Playing taught me a lot about myself. Coaching taught me even more about myself. But officiating taught me more about myself and how other people deal with you than anything I've ever done in my life. And I am so grateful for the chance I had to referee for 23 years in the Southeastern Conference and in the NCAA. It was absolutely wonderful.
Congratulations. You made all the attic rats proud of you, buddy.
Thank you, bud.
All right. Don Rutledge, the great Don Rutledge, officiated 6 Final Fours. You believe that? 6. I think I lost Ainsley. All right, so come on back, Ainsley. I lost you. Ainsley Lee coming up next. Sports writer. She is, haven't had her on in quite